for publication this year. Please give a warm welcome to David Cochran.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and thanks to all of you for coming. Okay, exciting topic, astrology. Science or superstition? Let's go for it. All right, let's dive right into this. First, let's talk about what we mean by astrology. And the definition that I have here is the belief that the positions of the planets and other celestial bodies affect human behavior in ways that are not related to gravity or other simple scientific explanations. Fair enough? Okay? I mean, we can argue fine points, but I think this is what we mean by astrology. That somehow Mars is over there and Venus is over there, so I'm having a bad day, I'm stubborn, whatever it is. And these things, of course, don't have any good basis in modern scientific thinking. Now, where do these ideas in astrology come from? Well, they go back thousands of years. We'll talk more about this in a little bit. But one of the points I want to make is that astrologers continue to invent new ideas. Okay? So they've been doing this for thousands of years, just concocting theories that if a planet is here, a certain behavior of certain people occurs. But it's an ongoing process, and I just wanted to make that point. It's been going on and still goes on. Astrologers continue to develop new ideas of the relationship of planets and stars to human behavior. And the third opening point I want to make is when you think of astrology, you might think of this Aries, Taurus, Gemini business, right? I mean, that's, I think, one of the more common ideas. And that is part of astrology, but it's not the only part. So these zodiac signs that you hear so much about are one way of describing places in the sky, and when planets are in those places, supposedly has some effect on human beings. But there are many, many, many other ideas that have nothing to do with zodiac signs. All right? I'm going to stop every once in a while, and I'm going to just say, are you all with me? Okay? And just to make sure we're fairly much together. So, you all with me? Reasonable? Okay? We're not going to agree about everything, but I'm just trying to set a little basis for where we're going to head to. All right, so we're talking about astrology. And our topic is this science or superstition? I almost said stupidstition. Is that a Freudian slip? All right. So for science, this is astrology is science. Okay, I've got a definition of science up there that I like to use. There's many, many definitions of science, but this is a common one. It comes from a fellow, Karl Popper, philosopher of science. And he says that something is scientific if it can be shown to be false. So the theory that all things fall to the ground is scientific, which I can disprove with a helium balloon, right? So not everything falls to the ground. That's a falsifiable statement. If I say God is good, that's, for all intents and purposes, not falsifiable, so it's not part of science. So this is what I'm going to use as the definition of science. Fair enough? It may not be your favorite definition, but I think this is pretty close to what we think of as science. Things we can measure, analyze, determine if they're true or not. And that was the essence of Karl Popper's idea of science, and we'll use that. Because we're going to say, is astrology science? I've defined astrology, I've defined science. I think these are pretty reasonable decisions. Okay, now, where does astrology sit in relationship to science if we use these definitions? I think that astrology does make falsifiable claims, and therefore is amenable, can be approached with the scientific method. For example, astrologers will say things like, you're stubborn because you are a Taurus. You're picky and critical because you are a Virgo. Have you heard these things? This is what astrologers say. You are philosophical and like to travel because you are a Sagittarius. So traveling is measurable. You can see if people who travel more have a lot of Sagittarius. And lastly, an example is you are accident prone this week because transiting Uranus is square to natal Mars. This would mean that Uranus in the sky today is in some relationship to where Mars was when you were born. So astrologers say accident prone. I think these are measurable, and therefore astrology could be evaluated scientifically. Yes, the question is.
Can you give us an example of how you would go about testing a person because you're a Taurus, how you would validate or falsify that?
Right. I think you'll heard the question, and it's a good one. Some statements by astrologers are easier to test than others. So for stubborn, these are the kinds of problems that psychologists run into. You have to create an operational definition. So we would have to have some way of measuring stubbornness, such as you give a difficult task to 30 people, and maybe there's no solution to the task, but the people in the experiment don't do it. But some people persist, like bulls, trying. So you set up an experimental design with some kind of measure of stubbornness. These are tricky things, but psychologists deal with it all the time. So some statements, are psychological constructs, are a little more difficult to test. Others, like accident prone, are easier to test. So not all statements in astrology can be tested scientifically, but some of them can. And some can, some cannot, and some can, but they're more difficult. Okay, we'll take another question.
I would differentiate that from saying you're a Taurus because you're stubborn.
You're a Taurus.
Because you're stubborn.
Okay. Okay, these are good questions. Yeah. These are good questions. In astrology, we take the positions of the planets in the sky. So there's a section of the sky that astrologers call Taurus. It's actually rather abstract. It's not the constellation Taurus, and so on. It's a tropical zodiac. But anyway, there's a section of the sky called Taurus. Well, obviously my being stubborn didn't move the sun in the sky. So the sun in the sky exists first and correlates with the behavior. So you can reasonably get a causal model where the astrology is causing or is a priori to the behavior. Because being Taurus didn't move the planets. So we take the planets when they were born and correlate them with human behavior.
Something that this thing said is how do you control for something that's along the lines of historical violence and subject to those?
Okay, we're going to get to that. We're going to get to all these questions. All right, I hope I answered the previous question reasonably well. But the point is simple. Astrologers say things like, you're going to be accident prone that I think are measurable and testable. So astrology, from my viewpoint, can be approached with the scientific method, at least some parts of it can. Now, the next big point. None of the falsifiable claims of astrology have been validated through research. Period. Some people like to say Michael and Francois Laughlin did it, they did not. Okay? There's still problems with their methodology. So nothing in astrology that's quantitative and measurable has been validated. No surprise to people who are skeptics, but whether you're a believer or not, that's the fact. Okay, we all together here? So we're laying out, is astrology science or superstition? I've laid out some basic concepts for the relationship of astrology to science and where it stands. Some ideas in astrology can be tested scientifically, and so far no one has validated anything. Okay, now this gets to some of the points you're making. There are other arguments about astrology's relationship to science. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I want to mention a few. One argument is that astrology is not logical. It does not make common sense. There's no adequate theory to explain it, and we should just throw it out as nonsense. The problem with this argument is that in order for something to be scientific, it does not have to make common sense. So some ideas in physics, you know, with relativity, time is going to speed up or slow down, something goes faster, may not make common sense. Why should motion be related to time is absurd, but it's true. So this, I don't feel, is a reasonable argument about the relationship of astrology to science, but it is often used. Okay? Do you follow my point? Because these are some of the things that are said, and I'm just trying to address it. I think the real issue with science is